Elena Martinez stood frozen outside the courthouse, her pulse hammering as the officer's cold voice sliced through the humid Georgia air. "You're under arrest," he barked, his badge glinting like a weapon under the streetlights. She hadn't expected her Victorino end with handcuffs. Just hours ago, Elena had stood before a judge, her voice steady as she argued against the state's latest attempt to roll back protections for people like her. At 28, she was a rising star in Atlanta's legal scene, a queer Latina lawyer who'd clawed her way through prejudice to become a beacon for the marginalized. Today, she'd won a case that struck down a discriminatory ordinance targeting LGBTQ+ businesses, a win that felt like a crack in the wall of hate. But now, Officer Daniel Hargrove, a man whose scowl carried the weight of his biases, was twisting her arms behind her back, his grip unnecessarily tight. Sarah Collins, Elena's partner of 3 years, stood a few feet away, her blue eyes wide with panic. The crowd outside the courthouse, reporters, activists, and onlookers murmured, their phones already recording. Sarah, 30, was the softer counterpoint to Elena's fire. A high school art teacher with a quiet strength, she'd been Elena's anchor through every late-night case prep and every tearful breakdown over the world's cruelty. "Daniel, stop," Sarah cried, stepping forward, her voice trembling but firm. "She hasn't done anything." Hargrove's lips curled into a sneer. "Stay back, ma'am, unless you want to join her." His tone dripped with disdain, the kind Elena had heard too often in her life, directed at her identity, her love, her existence. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the cold metal of the cuffs silenced her. What had she done? The case was over. She'd won. Yet here she was being marched toward a squad car like a criminal. As Hargrove shoved her forward, Elena's mind raced. She replayed the day. The courtroom, the judge's gavel, the cheers from her team. Had she missed something? A technicality? A trap? Her eyes locked with Sarah's, and in that fleeting moment, she saw not just fear but a fierce determination. Sarah wasn't going to let this go. Neither was she. The courthouse steps buzzed with chaos. Reporters shouted questions, their cameras flashing like vultures circling a fresh wound. Elena's colleagues from the ACLU pushed through the crowd, demanding Hargrove explain the charges. He ignored them, his focus on Elena, as if her very presence offended him. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he muttered under his breath, low enough that only she could hear. "People like you always push too far." Elena's blood boiled, but she bit her tongue. She knew men like Hargrove, men who wore their authority like armor to mask their fear of change. She'd faced them her whole life, from the small-town bullies who'd taunted her in high school to the judges who dismissed her arguments with a smirk. But this felt different, personal, as if Hargrove had been waiting for this moment. Sarah followed close behind, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone, already dialing their lawyer friend, Marcus. "Elena, don't say anything yet," she called, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We'll figure this out." Elena nodded, her heart swelling with love even as fear gnawed at her. Sarah's calm was a lifeline, a reminder that they'd face worse and come out stronger. The squad car's door slammed shut, sealing Elena inside. Through the window, she watched Sarah's figure grow smaller, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Hargrove climbed into the driver's seat, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. "You broke the law, Martinez," he said, his voice flat but laced with satisfaction. "And I'm gonna make sure you pay for it." Elena's mind spun. What law? She'd spent years studying the system, fighting it, bending it to protect the vulnerable. If she'd broken a law, she'd know. Wouldn't she? Doubt crept in, cold and insidious. Had her victory in court today crossed a line she hadn't seen? Or was this something else, something uglier, rooted in the kind of hate that didn't need a reason? As the car pulled away, Elena's thoughts drifted to the first time she'd met Sarah. It was at a protest rally 3 years ago outside this very courthouse. Elena had been speaking, her voice raw with passion, demanding equality. Sarah had been in the crowd holding a sign that read, "Love is not a crime." Their eyes had met, and in that instant, Elena felt something shift, a spark that promised she'd never be alone in this fight again. Now, as the courthouse faded from view, that memory anchored her. Whatever Hargrove thought she'd done, she'd face it. For Sarah. For herself. For everyone who'd ever been silenced. At the police station, The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elena was processed. Fingerprints, mugshot, the works. Hargrove stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her like a predator. She kept her chin high, refusing to let him see her fear. "What's the charge?" she finally asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. He smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." The holding cell was cold, the bench hard against her back. Elena sat, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she unknowingly violated some obscure statute? Had her activism made her a target? Or was this just Hargrove's personal vendetta? A power trip to punish her for who she was? She thought of Sarah out there fighting for her and clung to that image. They'd built a life together, late-night talks over coffee, stolen kisses in the rain, dreams of a future where they could just be. She wouldn't let Hargrove take that away. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Finally, a guard opened the cell door. "Martinez, your lawyer's here." Elena stood, smoothing her blazer, her resolve hardening. Whatever this was, she'd fight it. She always had. Elena's shoes echoed on the station's linoleum floor as she followed the guard to the meeting room. Her heart pounded, not from fear now, but from a growing fire within. She'd spent her life fighting battles against bigotry, against systems designed to keep people like her down, and this was just another one. Marcus Reed, her lawyer and longtime friend, was waiting, his face a mask of concern and fury. At 35, Marcus was a formidable presence, his sharp suits and sharper mind a weapon in courtrooms across Georgia. "Elena, you okay?" he asked, his voice low as he pulled her into a quick hug. "I'm fine," she lied, her wrists still sore from the cuffs. "What's going on, Marcus?" "Hargrove won't tell me the charge." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's because he's playing games. They're claiming you violated a new public conduct ordinance, something about disorderly behavior outside the courthouse. It's vague, deliberately so. I've got a copy of the citation and it's flimsy as hell. This reeks of a setup." Elena's stomach churned. A setup? She'd heard whispers of cops targeting activists, especially queer ones, with trumped-up charges to silence them. But this felt personal, like Hargrove had been waiting for an excuse. "What kind of ordinance?" she asked, her legal mind kicking into gear. Marcus slid a document across the table. "It's a local law, passed quietly last month, supposedly about maintaining public decorum, but it's a catch-all for anything they want to pin on someone. You were celebrating your win outside, right? With Sarah." Elena nodded, her mind flashing to the moment she'd stepped out of the courthouse, Sarah's arms around her, their lips brushing in a fleeting, joyful kiss. The crowd had cheered, and for once, Elena felt untouchable. Had that been it? A kiss? Her fists clenched. "They're punishing me for being happy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned forward. "Not just you. This is bigger. Hargrove's got a history, complaints about homophobic remarks, excessive force, you name it. But he's protected, connected to the good OL boys in the department. I'm betting he saw you and Sarah and decided to make an example." Elena's mind raced. She'd faced hate before, slurs shouted at pride marches, landlords who lost her application, but this was a new low. To be arrested for existing, for loving, felt like a betrayal of everything she'd fought for. "What do we do?" she asked. "We fight," Marcus said, his eyes blazing. "I'm filing a motion to dismiss. We'll get you out on bail tonight and then we dig. If Hargrove's got dirt, we'll find it. And Sarah's already rallying the troops outside. Your people aren't letting this go." Elena's heart lifted at the mention of Sarah. She could picture her now, standing in the parking lot, rallying activists, her gentle voice carrying the weight of their shared cause. Sarah wasn't just her partner. She was her partner in every sense, her equal in this fight for a better world. As Marcus gathered his papers, Elena's thoughts drifted to their first real date. Sarah had taken her to a quiet park outside Atlanta, where they'd sat under an oak tree, sharing stories of their childhoods. Sarah had spoken of her conservative upbringing, the years she'd spent hiding who she was, afraid of her family's judgment. Elena had shared her own scars, her mother's tearful acceptance, her father's silence. That night, under a sky full of stars, they'd promised to build a life where fear didn't win. Now that promise felt more vital than ever. Bail was set at an outrageous $5,000, a clear attempt to keep her locked up longer. But Sarah had worked fast, crowdsourcing funds from their community. By midnight, Elena walked out of the station, the cool night air a shock after the stale cell. Sarah was there, her arms open, and Elena fell into them, burying her face in Sarah's hair. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't be," Elena said, pulling back to meet her eyes. "This isn't your fault. It's theirs. And we're not done fighting." The next morning, their apartment was a war room. Activists filled the living room, laptops open, phones buzzing. Sarah coordinated with local reporters, while Marcus dug into Hargrove's record. Elena pored over the ordinance, her legal mind dissecting every vague clause. It was a weapon, designed to target anyone who didn't fit the right mold. And she'd been the perfect target, a queer Latina lawyer who just humiliated the city in court. As the day wore on, a pattern emerged. Marcus found complaints against Hargrove stretching back years, incidents swept under the rug by a department that valued loyalty over justice. One report stood out. A young trans woman arrested for loitering after a pride event, her claims of harassment ignored. Elena's anger grew. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone Hargrove had hurt, everyone the system had failed. Sarah sat beside her, her hand resting on Elena's knee. "We're going to expose him," she said, her voice steady. "Not just for you, but for all of us." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. She thought of the courthouse, of the victory she'd won just yesterday. It had felt like a step forward, a crack in the wall of hate. But Hargrove's actions were a reminder that progress was fragile, that every win came with a fight. She squeezed Sarah's hand, drawing strength from her touch. They'd face this together, as they always had. By evening, their plan was taking shape. Marcus would challenge the ordinance in court, arguing it was unconstitutional. Sarah was organizing a protest outside the police station, demanding accountability. And Elena? She'd do what she did best. Fight from the inside, using the law to dismantle the system that protected men like Hargrove. But as she looked at the documents piling up, a nagging doubt lingered. What if this wasn't just about the ordinance? What if Hargrove knew something she didn't? The protest outside the police station was electric, a sea of signs and voices demanding justice. Elena stood at the edge, her heart swelling as Sarah spoke to the crowd, her voice carrying over the megaphone. "This isn't just about Elena," Sarah said, her blonde hair glowing under the streetlights. "It's about every one of us who's been targeted for who we are, who we love. We won't be silenced." The crowd roared, and Elena felt a surge of pride. But her eyes kept drifting to the station, where she knew Hargrove was watching. She could feel his gaze, heavy with contempt. Marcus had warned her to stay low, to let the legal process work, but standing still wasn't in her blood. She needed answers. Back at their apartment, Elena and Marcus dug deeper into Hargrove's history. A pattern emerged. Arrests targeting queer people, especially those who were vocal, visible, defiant. Each case was built on shaky grounds, vague ordinances, questionable evidence, but none had been challenged successfully. The system protected its own. "He's untouchable," Marcus muttered, rubbing his temples. "But we're going to change that." Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the diner on 5th. Midnight. I have information." Her pulse quickened. She showed it to Sarah, who frowned. "It could be a trap," Sarah said, her voice tight. "Hargrove's not above playing dirty." But Elena's gut told her to go. "If there's a chance to learn something, I have to take it," she said. Sarah's eyes searched hers, and after a long moment she nodded. "I'm coming with you." The diner was a relic, its neon sign flickering in the dark. Inside, a woman sat alone in a booth, her face half hidden by a baseball cap. She was in her early 40s with sharp features and nervous eyes. "You're Elena," she said as they slid into the booth. "I'm Lisa. I used to work dispatch at the station." Lisa's hands trembled as she spoke. "Hargrove's been gunning for you for months. Ever since you started winning cases against the city. He's got friends in high places, cops, council members. They don't like what you represent." She glanced around, lowering her voice. "Your arrest wasn't random. It's personal. But there's something else. Something he doesn't know you did." Elena's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Lisa slid a folded paper across the table. "You filed a complaint against the department last week, right? for their handling of a hate crime case. It got Hargrove's partner, Officer Reed, suspended. Hargrove's furious. He thinks you're trying to take him down next. Elena's mind reeled. She had filed that complaint, part of her work exposing police misconduct in a case involving a gay teenager beaten outside a bar. She hadn't thought it would come back to her like this. So this is revenge? She asked. Lisa nodded. But there's more. Hargrove's been digging into your life. He's got something on you, something he thinks will ruin you. I don't know what it is, but he's waiting for the right moment to use it. Sarah's hand found Elena's under the table, squeezing tight. We need to know what he's got, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Lisa promised to keep digging and slipped out into the night, leaving Elena and Sarah with more questions than answers. Back home, Elena couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the complaint she'd filed. It was detailed, airtight, backed by evidence from witnesses and body cam footage. Had she been too bold? Too reckless? Sarah sat beside her, her presence a quiet comfort. You did the right thing, Sarah said softly. You always do. Elena shook her head. But at what cost? If Hargrove's got something on me, it could hurt you too. Our life, our work, everything. Sarah cupped Elena's face, her touch gentle but firm. We've faced worse. Remember when my parents cut me off? When your firm almost fired you for taking on that trans rights case? We got through it. We'll get through this. Elena leaned into her, drawing strength from her warmth. Sarah was right, they built something unbreakable. Not just a relationship but a shared mission. But the fear lingered. What could Hargrove have? A mistake from her past? A lie he'd twisted into truth? She thought of her teenage years, the reckless moments before she'd found her purpose. There was nothing damning, nothing that could destroy her. Or so she hoped. The next day the protests grew. National news outlets picked up the story, framing Elena's arrest as a flashpoint in the fight for queer rights. Social media exploded with justice for Elena, and Sarah's art students painted murals across the city, vibrant declarations of love and resistance. But with the attention came pressure. Hargrove's allies in the department doubled down, leaking stories to paint Elena as a troublemaker, a radical bent on chaos. Marcus called with bad news. The judge assigned to your case is Whitaker. He's a conservative hardliner, cozy with the police union. This just got harder. Elena's stomach dropped. Whitaker was notorious for siding with law enforcement, for dismissing cases like hers with a wave of his hand. She felt the walls closing in, but Sarah's voice cut through the noise. We're not giving up, she said, her eyes fierce. We'll fight in court, in the streets, wherever we have to. That night, Elena dreamed of the courthouse, of standing before Whitaker, her voice echoing as she pleaded her case. But in the dream, Hargrove was there, holding a file, his smirk promising ruin. She woke with a start, Sarah's arms around her, and made a decision. Whatever Hargrove had, she'd find it first. She'd tear his world apart before he could touch hers. Elena's days became a blur of strategy and sleepless nights. The courthouse loomed in her mind, not as a place of justice but as a battlefield. She and Marcus worked tirelessly, building a case to dismantle the ordinance and expose Hargrove's vendetta. Meanwhile, Sarah turned their apartment into a hub of resistance, coordinating with activists and artists to keep the pressure on. Lisa, the former dispatcher, became their secret weapon. Through cryptic texts, she fed them fragments of information, names of Hargrove's allies, dates of suspicious arrests, even a rumor that he'd been seen meeting with a city council member known for anti-LGBTQ+ rhetoric. Each piece was a thread in a larger tapestry of corruption, but none revealed what Hargrove had on Elena. One evening, as Elena pored over case law, Sarah sat beside her sketching. What's that? Elena asked, glancing at the paper. It was a drawing of them, Elena in her blazer, Sarah in her dress, standing hand in hand outside the courthouse, their faces lit with defiance and love. It's us, Sarah said softly. How I see us. No matter what happens, this is who we are. Elena's throat tightened. She pulled Sarah close, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise. I don't deserve you, she whispered. You deserve everything, Sarah replied, her voice fierce. And we're going to win this. But the next morning brought a blow. Marcus called, his voice grim. Hargrove's team just filed a new charge. They're claiming you tampered with evidence in the hate crime case, the one that got Reed suspended. They say you falsified a witness statement. Elena's blood ran cold. That's a lie, she said, her voice shaking. Every word in that complaint was true. The witnesses, the footage, everything checked out. I know, Marcus said. But they've got a witness now, someone claiming you coerced them. It's weak, but with Whitaker on the bench, it's enough to make things messy. Elena felt the world tilt. Tampering with evidence was a serious charge, one that could end her career, her reputation, everything she'd built. She thought of the witnesses in that case, a scared teenager, a bartender who'd seen the attack. Had one of them been pressured to lie? Or was this another fabrication, another weapon in Hargrove's arsenal? Sarah's hand found hers, grounding her. We'll prove it's a lie, she said. We'll find the truth. They turned to Lisa, who was risking everything to help. She met them at the diner again, her face pale. I found something, she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. It's a recording from the station's internal system. Hargrove talking to someone sounds like a council member. They're discussing you, Elena. How to neutralize you. Elena's hand shook as she plugged the drive into her laptop. Hargrove's voice crackled through the speakers, cold and deliberate. Martinez is a problem, he said. She's stirring up trouble, making us look bad. We need something big to shut her down. The other voice, smooth and calculated, replied, We'll make it stick. The tampering charge will bury her. Sarah's eyes blazed with anger. They're framing you, she said. This is proof. But Marcus was cautious. It's damning, but it's not enough. We need to know who that witness is, what they're saying. And we need to be careful. Hargrove's watching. Elena's mind raced. She thought of the teenager from the hate crime case, his bruised face, his fear. Had Hargrove gotten to him? Threatened him? She couldn't let this stand. I'm going to talk to him, she said, standing. The kid, Jamie. I need to know what they did to him. Sarah grabbed her arm. Elena, it's too dangerous. If Hargrove's watching, I have to, Elena said, her voice breaking. If they're using that kid to destroy me, I need to know why. Against Sarah's protests, Elena drove to Jamie's neighborhood, a rundown part of Atlanta where hope felt like a luxury. She found him at a community center, shooting hoops alone. He was 17, lanky, with eyes that carried too much weight. Jamie, she called softly, approaching. We need to talk. He froze, his gaze darting nervously. I can't, he muttered. They told me not to. Who? Elena asked, though she already knew. The cops, he said, his voice barely audible. They said if I didn't say what they wanted, they'd come after my mom. My little brother. Elena's heart broke. She saw herself in Jamie, the fear, the defiance, the weight of a world that didn't want them to win. I'll protect you, she said, her voice firm. But I need the truth. Jamie hesitated, then nodded. They wanted me to say you made me lie about the attack. That you told me what to say. But it's not true. You didn't do anything wrong. Elena's relief was tempered by rage. Hargrove had crossed a line, using a kid to get to her. She drove back to Sarah, her resolve stronger than ever. They had the recording, Jamie's truth. It was time to fight back. The courtroom was a crucible, the air thick with tension as Elena stood before Judge Whitaker. His stern face loomed over her, a reminder of the odds stacked against her. But she wasn't alone. Sarah sat in the front row, her presence a beacon of strength. Marcus stood beside Elena, his briefcase stuffed with evidence, the recording, Jamie's affidavit, and a dossier on Hargrove's history of misconduct. The hearing was a spectacle. Reporters packed the gallery, their pens scratching furiously. Outside, protesters chanted, their voices a distant hum through the courthouse walls. Elena's heart pounded, but she kept her eyes on Sarah, drawing courage from her unwavering gaze. Marcus presented their case with precision, dismantling the ordinance as unconstitutional and exposing Hargrove's pattern of targeting queer activists. He played the recording, and the courtroom fell silent as Hargrove's voice filled the room, plotting to neutralize Elena. Whispers erupted among the spectators. Whitaker's face remained unreadable, but Elena saw a flicker of unease. Then came Jamie's testimony. The teenager took the stand, his voice shaking but clear. He recounted the attack, the truth of his statement, and Hargrove's threats. Miss Martinez never told me to lie, he said, his eyes meeting Elena's. She helped me when no one else would. Elena's throat tightened. She thought of her own teenage years, the loneliness of being different in a world that demanded conformity. Jamie's courage was a mirror reflecting her own. Hargrove was called to testify. He sat stiffly, his face a mask of arrogance. Marcus tore into him, presenting evidence of his past complaints, his connections to anti-LGBTQ+ council members, his abuse of power. Hargrove deflected, claiming Elena's activism threatened public order. But under Marcus's relentless questioning, his story unraveled. The tampering charge collapsed when Jamie's affidavit was corroborated by another witness, the bartender, who'd also been pressured. In a stunning turn, Whitaker dismissed the charges against Elena. The evidence suggests a pattern of misconduct by Officer Hargrove, he said, his voice heavy. This court will not be a tool for personal vendettas. He ordered an investigation into Hargrove and the department, a rare rebuke from a judge known for siding with police. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Sarah rushed to Elena, their embrace a defiant celebration. But as they left the courthouse, Elena's eyes found Hargrove standing alone, his badge no longer a shield. She felt no triumph, only a weary resolve. This victory was hers, but it was also Jamie's, Lisa's, Sarah's, everyone who'd refused to be silenced. Days later, Elena and Sarah walked through the park where they'd had their first date. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold. "We did it," Sarah said, her hand warm in Elena's. "But it's not over, is it?" Elena shook her head. "It never is. But we're stronger than they are. Because we have this." She gestured to their joined hands, their shared life, their love. The investigation into Hargrove led to his suspension, and the ordinance was struck down in a follow-up ruling. Elena's firm offered her a promotion, but she declined, choosing instead to start a non-profit for queer youth, a place where kids like Jamie could find safety and hope. Sarah joined her, turning her art into a tool for healing, for resistance. As they stood under the oak tree, Elena thought of the courthouse, of the handcuffs, of the fear that had almost broken her. But she also thought of Sarah's sketches, of Jamie's courage, of the community that had rallied around them. Hate had tried to tear them apart, but love had won, not just their love, but the love of a community that refused to bow. They'd violated no law, only the unwritten rules of a world that feared them. And in that violation they'd found their power. Elena pulled Sarah close, her heart full. The fight would go on, but so would they together, unbreakable. A testament to what love could do. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.